Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I have been your host and beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars every single day since August 2019, and we're continuing to push forward through yet another offseason together. All right, folks, welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. Today, a lot of AFC South news, really specifically with the Houston Texans. And some news that really in a roundabout way could have, an impact on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, first of all, the Texans trading offensive lineman Tyus Howard to the Cleveland Browns for a fifth-round pick. Howard then received a new 3-year deal from the Cleveland Browns for over $20 million per year. He had a strong year for Houston last year. This comes literally just a year after they trade Laramie Tunsil to Washington Commanders. And Tunsil ends up having one of, frankly, the best years of his career. I know the Commanders were otherwise terrible last season, but the Tunsil deal obviously aged better for them than it aged for Houston. I know Houston, took a rookie tackle, struggled a little bit at the start of the season, and then obviously improved as the season went on. But he's not a Tunsil level player, and I think you can make a good argument Howard was set to be their best offensive lineman next year, depending on obviously how the draft played out. I think this is a Houston team that has such a rare and special defense that any chance that they waste it due to their offensive moves is something for the Jaguars to pay attention to. The Jaguars, very easily. I know the AFC South won a lot of games between the Jags, Texans, and Colts last season, but the Jaguars very easily can make the AFC South championship a spot that they are consistently in simply by being a competent team. You can beat the Colts like that. You can beat the Titans like that. And the Texans continue on this trajectory that they've been heading on the last couple of years in terms of their moves along the offensive line. It seems like you can throw them in that mix too. The Texans have needed line upgrades, for the last 2 seasons. It was really, really bad in 2024. I wouldn't say quite as bad last year, but eventually, getting rid of some of the talent, is that the answer? Maybe replace some guys, but to replace the 2 best, I'm not so sure. And I say that while understanding that they have Will Anderson coming up. Did they want to pay him Howard $20 million a year when they have Anderson and eventually CJ Stroud, to pay? Probably not. And that I understand. And I do think the savings in this scenario are obviously a big part of this too. With that in mind, I feel like the Texans' offensive line is just what's held them back from being more than just a perennial AFC South contender. That's all the Texans have been in the big picture of things. Despite the generational defense that give them many other offenses at the top of the ladder in the AFC South last season, probably would have done more with that defense. The way the Texans got knocked out of the playoffs against the Patriots, even the performance on offense against the Steelers a week ago, the Texans needed to take a clear step on offense this offseason. And it's not to say that trading Howard means that is no longer possible, because I don't necessarily think, obviously, that's fair. But that's a good player. He's a talented player. If you're the Jaguars, Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker have had big games against the Texans in recent years, but especially so against non-Howard and non-Tunsil guys. I think you love this trade. If you're looking at this from a Jacksonville, teals colored lenses, I think this trade is a good thing for the Jaguars. It's the second trade in a week in which a talented player has left the AFC South. And again, there's reasons both did it, but between this trade, which obviously won't be official until the start of the league year, and the Devondre Sweat trade several days ago, it's hard for me to think either AFC South team got better in that scenario. I don't think this is, why'd you add a Jermaine Johnson level trade like Tennessee's was. But I don't think it's one that made them better. And I think it's one that can help improve the Jaguars' positioning in the AFC South as they move forward. Because that's got to be the focus in Jacksonville. Above all else, how do you win the division? How do you, every single year, prove that you are better than the Colts, the Tennessee Titans, and the Houston Texans? And that's not even just on the field. That's off the field, too. How can they do it this offseason? How can they move smarter, make more, prudent and efficient decisions than any of these teams do? By not making deals like this one. It's, again, I understand at least their logic, which I think is better than making a trade in which the logic is impossible to identify. But I think their offensive line got worse today. Then, after that trade, they made another one. Perhaps the Jaguars need to spice it up. Jaguars and Colts, only AFC South teams. There have been 3 trades agreed to before the start of the league year. All 3 trades have involved an AFC South team, but not the Colts and not the Jaguars. The second trade, of course, was the Texans trading for the Detroit Lions running back David Montgomery, a trade in which they sent a 4th-round pick, a 7th-round pick, and offensive lineman Juice Scruggs. Juice Scruggs is, Scruggs has just not been really a startable player for much of his time in the NFL. It was obviously a high draft pick Houston used that they hoped, would pan out and develop, and it didn't happen. I think he's kind of a throwaway piece of this trade. Otherwise, I think the Lions getting a 4th and a 7th for David Montgomery. It's pretty good business, honestly. And I say that knowing that David Montgomery has been very productive throughout his career. Even last year, he didn't get quite as many touches or play as much because Jahmyr Gibbs had kind of elevated his game to a whole nother level. But even last year, he was really efficient on the touches that he got. He's still a talented player. It's just he's near 30 years old. And it is interesting that the Texans felt like they needed to send 2 picks over for him. It definitely says something to me about this year's running back class. I think that, the Texans don't make this trade, if they like the depth. But I also think that when you take a step back and look at this trade outside of, David Montgomery, a really talented running back, just got added to the AFC South twice a year. I think it's the fact that there goes the worst case scenario for the Travis Etienne situation. It is now off the board. To me, the worst case scenario was letting Travis Etienne hit the open market and then him signing a deal with the Houston Texans. And yes, it's a very narrative-based take. I don't have any stats or numbers to throw behind it. It's just my feeling that, the Jaguars, there's something to be said about potentially letting a guy leave after he has the season Etienne had last year. The touchdowns, the yards from scrimmage, the highlight plays. Etienne was absolutely massive for the Jaguars last year. So there's something to say that it's already hard enough, I think, potentially losing that guy in free agency. But on the other hand, on the opposite side of that, had he hit free agency and signed with the Houston Texans, I don't think the Jaguars would have wanted to play Etienne twice a year. And that's not me saying Etienne is some, ultimate elite blue chip back with no flaws, and he's the next big thing at the position. He's obviously a very talented back, and it wouldn't be like a doomsday scenario. But Etienne is a player who has kind of become intergrained with the Jaguars in recent years. I don't think you want to see him end up with a rival. I don't think that you want to play him twice a year. I think if you ask me tomorrow which running back should the Jaguars rather face in 2 big games next year, Etienne or Montgomery, as in who's the weaker matchup, I'd say Montgomery. So he'll obviously help the Texans in some areas. But trading for a running back while trading away your best offensive lineman, I think definitely raises some questions. And I think as things stand today, the Jacksonville Jaguars definitely look like the most well-oiled machine in the AFC South.